This is like one of those movies that randomly gets made into a Broadway musical, only to be later adapted back into a different movie. Except they didn't want to waste any time here and just skipped right over the Broadway stage. Hey everybody, welcome to Mainely Movies. Today I'm going to be talking about the 2024 musical psychological drama sequel, Joker, Folie, Deux. If you're new here, please consider subscribing for a variety of movie-related content, like reviews, rank lists, and trailer reactions. All of my reviews include a breakdown of the pros and cons, my rating, and some tailored film recommendations, so be sure to watch through to the end of this video for all of that extra content. Joker, Folie Deux stars Joaquin Phoenix, Lady Gaga, and Catherine Keener, and was directed by Todd Phillips. Set 2 years after the events of Joker, it tells the story of Arthur Fleck's trial and his unhealthy relationship with fellow Arkham inmate, Leigh. Joker, Folie Deux is one of the most boldly bizarre cinematic experiments I have seen in a long time, and possibly the most bizarre I've ever seen in this particular genre. I realize that might sound a bit weird and borderline hyperbolic, but I think we've got to set the stage to really grasp the oddity here. This is a sequel, and not just any sequel, but a comic book movie sequel. It's a follow-up to a dark, heavily Scorsese-influenced character study, an anti-blockbuster that went on to be a blockbuster in its own right, going on to become the highest-grossing R-rated film of all time, holding that title for 5 years before being usurped by another comic book movie, Deadpool and Wolverine. The first Joker film, and its ensuing fandom, took on an unsavory life of its own after a while, but I did enjoy the film, and thought it was an interesting and well-made movie. I didn't think it needed a sequel, something that, at least at the time, director Todd Phillips agreed with me on, but I can't say I was surprised when I heard a Joker 2 was in the works. I was surprised, however, when I heard that it was purportedly going to be a musical. I can't say that I was excited by that news, but at the very least, I was intrigued and maybe a bit morbidly curious to see how something like that could even work. And it turns out that it can't really. A sequel to Joker was going to be polarizing regardless, but the choices made here in the sequel ensured that the majority of audiences would be drawn to the negative pole. So let's start by talking about the melodious elephant in the room. Joker, Folie Deux is a musical. This was widely reported on and pretty obviously incorporated into the visual style of the first trailer, but for some reason, the filmmakers and others involved with the project have been reluctant to say the words. So I will. Joker, Folie Deux is a musical. Specifically, it's what's often referred to as a jukebox musical, which just means the characters sing popular pre-existing songs rather than new original music. This film features about a dozen or so musical numbers. Some of these are more subtle and restrained, but there are quite a few that feature elaborately staged and choreographed dance numbers as well. As expected, the musical nature of this movie is a choice. It sounds really bizarre, for sure, and it is, but the incorporation of it technically makes sense from a story perspective. I'm not going to spoil the specifics of that, though anybody who knows a little French probably already has a pretty good idea. So it makes sense technically, but certainly not tonally. And from an execution perspective, the musical numbers are a bit of a mixed bag. Joaquin Phoenix and Lady Gaga can obviously both sing, and even through the intentionally untrained sounding and frequently whispered singing are pleasant enough to hear. But that doesn't change the fact that it's a gimmick, which adds nothing of substance to the film. This musical aspect will likely be the big determining factor for most audiences, but we've also got to talk about the story. This is where I think the film had the most potential. There were several possible ways to follow up a story like Joker, many of which could have worked well, and the story actually chosen here was one of those. It attempts to keep in line with the internalized character study and broad condemnation of society seen in the first film. At its plot core, Joker Folie Deux is actually a courtroom drama, with the story revolving around Arthur's trial for the crime committed in the first movie. Intermixed with this is his meeting and the ensuing manipulative relationship with fellow Arkham inmate, Harley Leigh Quinn. While not the follow-up story most audiences probably had in mind after seeing Joker, it's still one that could have worked, offering up more social commentary and delving even further into the broken mind of Arthur Fleck. Instead, it dives in and gives us musical numbers. The stop-start halting nature of the songs negatively affects the pacing here, and results in a disappointingly thin plot and severely underutilized characters. Again, there was a lot of potential there, even with the story direction, but it was approached in a frustratingly aimless way, incessantly spinning its wheels until the final 15 or 20 minutes of the movie. I know this has been a very negative review so far, but Joker Folie Deux isn't all bad. The performances by Joaquin Phoenix, Lady Gaga, and a handful of supporting cast were solid, especially considering what they were given to work with. And this is still a well-made film on a technical level, just like its predecessor. The score is strong, the production design and costumes are still period spot on, and even offer a bit more vibrant and colorful fun with the musical numbers. And of course, the cinematography and overall moody filmic look of the movie is still great, featuring some wonderful and memorable shots, like one of Arthur smoking and silhouetted in his dark cell. So this is not a film without redeeming qualities. It's not horrible. It's not the worst sequel. It's not the worst comic book movie ever made. It's not even the worst comic book movie this year. But it's also not what you expect it to be, and most likely not what you want from a Joker sequel. Given the idolatry of the first film by a particularly unsavory subset of fans, it wouldn't be a huge stretch to hypothesize that many of the more bizarre and unexpected filmmaking choices here were intentional reversals of elements of that first film, as a bit of a jabbing response to those people who didn't quite understand the message of the first movie. In this scenario, the character of Leigh could even be viewed as a stand-in for the audience. This all may be true, or maybe nothing more than a reason-seeking conspiracy theory, but in either case, it doesn't change the fact that much of what's here doesn't work, either as its own thing, or especially as a follow-up to Joker. Alright, let's talk about the pros and cons. The biggest and really only pro for me here is broadly the technical elements. The largest component of this is the cinematography, which is close to being on par with that of the first film. This movie is a lot more static and contained, apart from the musical numbers, of course, but it's still dynamically shot and imbued with a very filmic moodiness. There aren't quite as many frameable shots this time around, but the ones that are here stand out. Apart from the cinematography, this movie features another strong score and some great production design and costuming that are able to capture both sides of the film. On the con side, the biggest issue is the musical approach. Now, I'm certainly not the biggest musical fan out there, so it was unlikely that I was ever going to love this aspect of the film, but certain stories lend themselves to being musicals. They just work in the style. Joker Folie Deux is not one of those types of stories. Whether on its own or as a follow-up to Joker, this just doesn't work as a musical. It technically makes sense from a forced story perspective, so you could sort of buy into them breaking into song and dance, but it doesn't add anything to the story besides jarring tonal dissonance. The second con is the plot. There are a lot of different ways a follow-up to Joker could have gone. I imagine many people were hoping for something that would turn things towards a more familiar version of the Joker, but I think a courtroom drama focusing on the consequential aftermath of the first film held a lot of potential, and was fairly in line with the story of that first film. Even the introduction of Harley, or Leigh as the case may be, held promise. Unfortunately, the film does very little with the plot, instead opting to give most of the time and focus to musical numbers, which amounted to little more than filler. The plot itself is left to aimlessly splutter, only gaining some semblance of direction and traction during the final 20 minutes. Unfortunately, it was too little, too late. Before I give you my rating and recommendations, I want to remind you that if you're interested in buying Joker Folie Deux or any of the other films I mentioned today, I do have affiliate links for all of them in the description below. I get a small commission from anything you buy using one of my links, so I'd really appreciate it if you'd use them if you're in the market for any of these movies. I'm gonna give Joker Folie Deux 2.5 out of 5 paws. It's got some strong cinematography and a pair of good performances, but the aimless and thin plot ensures that they're underutilized. And although making this a musical was a bold and unique decision, it was not a particularly good one, resulting in a bizarre and tonally jarring sequel. I would recommend Joker Folie Deux to fans of musicals who are typically disappointed by the lack of risk-taking in blockbuster IPs. Yeah, gotta get weirdly specific for this one, because it's hard to pinpoint exactly who's gonna actually like this. It'll certainly have its fans, but I honestly think most people aren't gonna enjoy it. It's a movie that very much depends on its predecessor and assumes you've seen it. But this film is in such a weird position, because if you liked Joker, I think there's a very good chance that you're not gonna like the shift in direction here. But at the same time, if you didn't like the first movie, I'm not sure this one will have anything to offer you either, unless you're just really into jukebox musicals or are a huge Lady Gaga fan. If you liked Joker, Folie à Deux, I would recommend Chicago. This Oscar-winning film is certainly a more traditional musical than this one, but in addition to its lavish and extravagant musical numbers, it's largely set in prison or court and has a story that focuses on manipulative characters and society's fascination with crime. Keeping the city theme going, you might want to check out New York, New York. Directed by Martin Scorsese, whose work significantly influenced the first Joker, this is a dark and often meandering musical-laced drama about an unhealthy and tumultuous relationship between two musicians. It features musical numbers that make a bit more sense in the context of the film, but also boasts intense performances by Robert De Niro and Liza Minnelli. And if you'd like a film that incorporates its musical elements in a similar way to Folie à Deux, then you'll want to watch Dancer in the Dark. This film also features a famous pop singer in a lead role, Björk in this case, focusing on the tragic story of a woman with a degenerative eye condition. In an effort to escape the tragedy of her reality, she often daydreams that parts of her life are actually a musical. The film's title is also a reference to a song in The Bandwagon, which is, of course, prominently featured in a scene in Folie à Deux. Alright, a couple questions for you guys. Number 1, have you seen Joker, Folie à Deux? If so, what'd you think of it? And number 2, what's your favorite musical? Be sure to leave your answers in the comments below so we can get a discussion going. Alright, so if you got some enjoyment, insight, or information on this review, I'd appreciate it if you'd hit that like button. And if you haven't done so already, please hit subscribe while you're at it to see more videos like this. Till next time, this has been Alyssa with Mainely Movies, the way life should be.